The previous picture is of myself, Joe Hare, Christian Ringel, and Marco Sarstedt. We're the authors of one of the most widely cited books in data analysis. And I put a cover on it on this particular slide as well. Right now, as I'm taping this, we have more than 50,000 sites on Google Scholar. And the book, as you can see, is titled Partial Least Square Structural Equation Modeling. It seemed obviously like a fitting backdrop for the session we have now on data analysis and interpretation as it relates to international marketing research. It's also a nice global team of Joe Hare from the United States, Christian Ringel and Marcus Storstedt are both from Germany. And of course, I'm a dual citizen from Sweden and the United States. The first edition of the book, just for tidbits, had Swedish colors on the cover, like you can see here. So this is the first version. We're a few editions in and many around the world as well. Anyway, PLS, partial least square modeling, originated at Uppsala University, my hometown university, with Herman Wold. And then there are additional structural equation modeling gurus, frankly, legendary gurus, Carl Jørskog and Dag Sørbom, that their work turned into LISREL, linear structural equation modeling. But PLS and LISREL both come from Uppsala University, which I'm very proud of since I'm a professor there as well. I've been a visiting professor at Uppsala University for a long time now. I added this original cover for fun, given the Swedish colors, but like I said, there are lots of versions and lots of colors and lots of languages now. Very applicable to our session on data analysis. In a groundbreaking study, a team of researchers actually used PLS to uncover hidden relationships in consumer behavior data. Their innovative approach revealed the key factors driving brand loyalty previously obscured by traditional methods. So PLS also teases out a more holistic, almost ecosystem-oriented analysis of different relationships that may come through. So their breakthrough not only advanced marketing science, but also helped the company design targeted strategies, boosting customer retention by 20% in that particular case. And I would say that the success of this study exemplifies the transformative power of PLS in research. That's a little bit of the tidbit on PLS and perhaps what we can use that technique for. Before we dig into the topic of data analysis and interpretation, it's important to remind ourselves that over-analyzing and over-interpreting data or using big data just to say we did is not the way to go. I like this sketch from Shep Hyken's team, the single panel comic setup that I like using in every session. But this particular one, customers shouldn't be bothered with unnecessary details. Just tell them what they want and need to know unless they ask for more. So one of our earlier comic strips had collecting a lot of data as well. This guy is kind of pushing back on that in terms of I don't need to divulge my resume to buy XYZ products. Same goes for international marketing research more broadly. We need to understand the international marketplace, but we need to be guided by research questions or even research hypotheses so that we do not collect data on everything and try to read anything and everything into what the data might tell us. Back to 195 or so countries, 62 territories, more than 8 billion people. There's just too much out there to collect data on everything. We have to be a little bit more succinct and efficient and effective than that. Basically, customers value simplicity. Instead of overwhelming them with details, focus on the core needs. For instance, if a customer asks about product delivery, simply state, your order will arrive in 3 days, or whenever it will arrive. Very specific on that particular question. Provide additional information only if they request it, ensuring clear and efficient communication with customers on what their needs and wants are, as opposed to perhaps everything that you may want to ask for the future. So here we go. Welcome to today's session on data analysis and interpretation in international marketing research. Let's start by creating a little bit of a picture. Picture a treasure map where data points are the clues leading to hidden opportunities in global markets. This session will uncover the secrets of transforming raw data into powerful insights that can drive successful marketing strategies. from identifying trends to understanding cultural nuances, as we talk about them a lot. We'll explore how to interpret data that tells a story of consumer behavior across different countries. Some of the top issues in data analysis are data quality and consistency, cross-cultural comparability, and handling large data sets. So let's take a little bit of a look at those. And I spelled out a lot of the details of these examples and stories right here. So follow along with me if you so feel inclined. So ensuring high quality and consistent data across diverse sources and regions is crucial for reliable analysis. Data inconsistencies can lead to erroneous conclusions, of course, and poor decision making. And perhaps as a positive example that I included up there too in soft green on the chart, OECD's PISA assessments, rigorous data validation procedures. In those assessments, rigorous data validation procedures are employed to ensure consistency and reliability, of course, of, in this case, educational data, something that I would be really interested in. We always see, we do really well in language things or English language in the United States, maybe not so great in math on average, but the comparisons across countries is really important and intriguing to someone like me, for example. So as an FYI, the PISA measures 15-year-olds' ability to use their reading, mathematics, and science knowledge and skills to meet real-life challenges. And we see some of those data points in the news media every so often when they come out. Analyzing data from different cultural contexts requires careful consideration, obviously, of differences in cultural values, beliefs, norms, and artifacts to ensure that we have meaningful comparisons and interpretations across the different cultures. Country cultures, one, perhaps, but also subcultures as we go in deeper into certain countries. We can say that perhaps Sweden with 10 million people is fairly homogeneous, but obviously 330 million plus people in the United States, we have a variety of different subcultures. So variations in cultural norms and practices can impact data relevance, obviously. In consumer behavior research in particular, companies like Procter & Gamble adapt their data analysis methods to account for cultural differences. These values and beliefs, norms and artifacts, mainly values and beliefs that we talk about, but those affect product usage and preferences across global markets. International research often also involves large and complex data sets that require advanced analytical techniques. And I mentioned partial least square modeling because obviously I'm heavily involved with that book and in numerous languages now. We can use that for a holistic take on it. If we're looking at a particular relationship, we can perhaps use less sophisticated techniques like normal multiple regression or something like that. Anyway, we have options for these things, and we need to take those options into account, especially when we look at processing big data that can be challenging. The World Bank utilizes big data as we might expect, since they want to cover the world and the gamut of the world in terms of their analytics to analyze economic indicators and development metrics from multiple countries. Thereby, in their particular case, of the World Bank, that can give us insights that inform global economic policies. But I've said it once before, we don't want to torture the data till it confesses. So ideally, we pick techniques that are applicable for what we're testing, and we don't over test it. And that is especially true when it comes to big data, because big data has a chance, with sample sizes being huge, in other words, huge sample sizes give significant relationships, perhaps where significant relationships are not warranted. Let's continue to build the IMR toolkit, as I like to call it, the International Marketing Research Toolkit that we're building in this course, and I hope you appreciate sort of that aspect of it as well. I put a lot of small text on this slide, kind of like the last slide. I put a lot of text, more so than normal, just to tell the story that way, I guess. In this case, it could be a Cliff Note version, as we called it in archaic times, to get an idea of what's going on in a book or on this particular slide, what goes on the slide. Then I picked 10 different statistical software packages that you may find valuable. I'm venturing to guess that you heard of most of them. I also classified them into the top 4 for international marketing research, at least the way I see it and the way I like to think about it: SPSS, R, SAS or SAS, and STATA. And I'm a heavy user of the first 3, if you will. Nevertheless, my top 4 are those. The other ones are great as well, but that also leaves out Smart PLS and Lisserl, which I use for structural equation modeling and partial least square modeling a lot as well. And those give you a more holistic, perhaps, take on a number of different phenomena going on with the data. So overall, here we have 10 examples of statistical software used in international marketing research. I think the description is straightforward and generally understood by what's there, but SPSS, for example, could be used by a multinational company to analyze consumer satisfaction surveys in Germany, or is a coding kind of language that we use for a lot of add-on packages, if you will, to R, but it could be employed by researchers in India to analyze market trends in the e-commerce sector, just to give you an example. SAS or SES, utilized by a pharmaceutical company in Japan for segmentation and sales forecasting. SAS and SPSS are competitors in some way, and they can do a lot of the same things as many of these software packages can do, but some are uniquely targeted towards certain stats analysis versus others. Stata, applied by University in Brazil to study the impact of social media marketing on consumer behavior. Minitab, adopted by an automotive company in South Korea to analyze quality control and improve processes. Tableau, I think you have run into in the program as well, but could be used by a retail chain in France to visualize sales performance across different regions. And a good old-fashioned Microsoft Excel, the old staple within the Microsoft suite of software, was leveraged by a startup in Kenya to track and analyze marketing campaign performance, perhaps going beyond spreadsheet functions, if you will. Python with pandas and scikit-learn. Tough one for me to say as a Swedish guy. It's used by a tech firm in China to develop predictive models for consumer purchasing patterns. MATLAB, utilized by an aerospace company in the United Kingdom for data analysis and market simulations. eViews, employed by a financial institution in Australia to forecast economic indicators and market trends. Overall, I only picked 10 here. Sometimes I pick 20 of whatever topic we're talking about, as you might recall. But overall, these software tools enable researchers and marketers to analyze data efficiently and make informed decisions in various international markets. I did use 10 very short examples to give you some flavor of the tools, but I think you get the picture of the capabilities. These are, when you talk about these software packages, there are some gigantic capabilities built into them, and I hope you take a look at whichever turns out to be your favorite program. Part of what we do when the data come in and we build a database, often combining primary surveys, is that if we often combine primary survey data with secondary data, and then after that we clean it and make sure it is of high quality. So several strategies exist for dealing with inconsistencies in the data collected from different international markets. And that's what we're talking about a little bit here with a few global examples as well. First, at the outset, implementing standardized protocols for data collection ensures consistency across different markets, reducing discrepancies caused by a bunch of different varied technologies that you may be using in the different parts of the world, depending on how you go about collecting the data. So the example here that I want to use is the World Health Organization, or WHO, uses standardized health surveys and protocols across countries to ensure comparability of health data and accurate global health assessments. Second, data cleaning involves detecting and correcting errors in the data set. Pre-processing steps like normalization, transformation are crucial for maintaining data integrity. The United Nations Development Program, UNDP, conducts rigorous data cleaning processes on human development indices to ensure reliable and accurate international comparisons. Basically, if we have a couple of outliers, how far are they? What do they mean? Are they real? Was it the wrong coding, the cleanup of the data, input, and so forth, if we don't have it electronically done automatically? And of course, employing robust statistical techniques really help mitigate the impact of these problems that I mentioned. Methods such as outlier detection, imputation, and robust regression can handle inconsistencies effectively. As an example, in the European Union, Eurostat uses advanced statistical techniques to handle inconsistencies in economic data from member states, ensuring reliable and consistent reporting. And then validating data collection instruments across different cultures ensures that they are culturally appropriate, and we've harped on that quite a bit. And the data, of course, is comparable then. This includes translation, back translation, and most importantly, perhaps, pilot testing. Oftentimes, companies may go a little low on resources and skip on the pilot testing, but it becomes incredibly important to better understand what may happen with the real test. In multinational consumer research, companies like Nielsen conduct cross-cultural validation to adapt their surveys for different cultural contexts, ensuring that responses are meaningful and comparable. And then finally, establishing continuous monitoring systems and feedback loops help identify and address inconsistencies promptly. Regular data audits and updates improve data quality over time. And I'll go a little closer to another one of my interest areas, supply chains, or global supply chains in particular. Remember, you have that free book in PDF format you can download on global supply chain management too. But I haven't used very many global supply chain examples, but here it goes. In the global supply chain industry that I do a lot of work in, also companies like FedEx that we had a clip of before and DHL use continuous monitoring and real-time feedback mechanisms to detect and correct data problems, ensuring in their case operational efficiency and data accuracy. If we assume the data set is clean and of high quality, we can move on to analysis. One of the more important techniques for international marketing research is multi-level modeling or multi-level analysis. Multi-level modeling is incredibly important in international research. I can't stress it enough, and it's a tremendous upgrade from forcing the unit of analysis to be the same level as we did for decades. For decades we were saying that if we measure input variables, call them independent variables, predictors, what have you, at the unit of analysis being the person or a customer, we have to look at the outcomes at the customer level as well. We have moved far beyond that in statistical capabilities with programs like HLM and what have you. So multi-level analysis or hierarchical linear modeling, the HLM acronym that I mentioned, is used to analyze data with nested structures, such as individuals within regions or countries, or customers within firms, within industries, within strategic groups within countries. It could be a whole host of different nested relationships that we're looking at. It accounts for the variability at each level, providing more accurate and nuanced insights. It's too far-fetched to think that customers of the same company weren't somehow in some way connected to some degree, and in the past they were never connected to the company and the company bottom line performance. And there are a whole host of reasons why multi-level modeling is tremendously valuable, especially for international marketing research. Lots of international examples exist, but for example, the OECD, since we've talked about them a little bit already in this session, uses multi-level analysis to study educational outcomes, considering individual student performance nested within schools, and the schools are nested within countries. Multi-level analysis also helps account for regional differences and variability in the data, enabling researchers to understand a context at different levels, say country, region, community, influences outcomes. A more practical example in public health research, the WHO, World Health Organization, employs multi-level models to analyze the impact of regional healthcare infrastructure and policies on individual health outcomes across different countries. So by considering hierarchical data structures, multi-level analysis improves the precision and accuracy of statistical models. There are things that happen from one level to another level that interact with each other and were never taken into account a few decades ago, and now always taken into account with multi-level modeling. It enables the inclusion of random effects and fixed effects to better capture the complexity of international data sets. The World Bank, for example, uses multi-level analysis to assess economic development programs, evaluating how country-level policies and local implementation practices affect economic growth and poverty reduction in the different nested aspects of that multi-level modeling. Another important data analysis tool, and this one has been around for a while, we use different techniques to test it, nevertheless, is longitudinal techniques to observe trends, of course, and changes in international markets. Tremendously important for companies to understand the longitudinal aspects of what they do in marketing and so on. For example, time series analysis involves examining data points collected or recorded at specific time intervals to identify trends, cycles, and seasonal variables. It is essential for forecasting and understanding market dynamics. As an example, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF for short, uses time series analysis to monitor and predict global economic indicators, such as the common ones, GDP, gross domestic product, the growth of it, or just flat out rates, inflation rates obviously, and so on across all the different countries that they're interested in, which is pretty much every country. Longitudinal data analysis more generally tracks the same variables over extended periods, allowing researchers to study changes and developments within markets and assess the impact of specific interventions. This is where we also get the cause and effect analysis. The World Bank conducts, for example, longitudinal studies on poverty reduction, analyzing how economic policies and programs affect poverty levels in various countries over time. And then finally, panel data for this particular topic. Panel data analysis combines cross-sectional and time series data, examining multiple subjects over time. This method accounts for individual heterogeneity and provides a more comprehensive view of trends and patterns. The example I want to use here is, again, the European Union's Eurostat that uses panel data analysis to study labor market trends, tracking employment rates, job creation, and workforce mobility across member states over several years. As you've probably seen by now, ethics and culture do affect a lot of what's going on in the international marketing research. So it's time a little bit again on this topic for some more culture nuances or discussion. Culture context shape how data is perceived and interpreted. Researchers must consider cultural norms, values, behaviors, or the norms, values, and beliefs and so forth that result in behaviors when analyzing data to avoid misinterpretation and ensure accurate insights. In consumer research and marketing campaigns, success in the United States might differ in Japan due to varying cultural attitudes towards advertising and brand perception, as one example. Because we got scaling and measurement and all kinds of different differences, frankly, between Japan and the United States in measuring things, as we've alluded to a few times. Cultural sensitivity, again, in data analysis involves recognizing and respecting cultural differences, ensuring that data collection instruments and then analytical methods are appropriate for the target culture. In Global Health Service, the WHO, World Health Organization, adapts questionnaires to fit local languages and cultural nuances, ensuring that the data collected is relevant and accurately reflects the health behaviors of different populations, as just one example. Keep using some of the same organizations there, and hopefully that it creates a little bit of a track record in understanding those as well. And then finally on this one, training analysts in cultural competence and collaborating with local experts enhance the cultural sensitivity of research. This approach ensures that cultural contexts are appropriately integrated into data interpretation. Multinational companies like Unilever, for example, work with local researchers typically to tailor market studies, ensuring that cultural insights are embedded in product development and especially marketing strategies and implementation across diverse regions. Now, the effects of cultural values, beliefs, norms, and artifacts, those are the four I typically like to include in culture. Some people include behavior as well, but I'm not a fan of that. I think values, beliefs, norms, and artifacts make up culture, and they do affect what goes on with customers' behaviors, people's behavior, and so forth, but they're not embedded into the culture per se. Anyway, the effects of cultural values, beliefs, norms, and artifacts on international marketing research, every gamut of international marketing research, are obviously tremendous. We have often a hard time figuring out the nuances, though, unfortunately, of culture's impact on IMR, international marketing research, on customers, and of course on the customer journey. So it takes effort here. This comic strip or single panel comic is in that spirit. It's nice to know your customers gave you a 5-star rating. Great. It's even nicer to know why. Answering the why question is incredibly helpful to strategic marketing decision making, and then of course implementation of what we want to do with that data and the understanding that we just gained. Now, assuming we interpreted data as intended with all cultural issues involved, we then start to figure out how to best portray the data for maximum impact. What are some effective methods for visualizing, presenting data that encapsulates findings from diverse markets? Well, for a while now, we've had dashboards of some kind, and interactive dashboards at that for a while as well. They enable real-time data exploration and visualization, allowing users to filter and drill down into specific data points. In other words, users can play with the data through the dashboard, and that's fun for some. They provide a dynamic way to present complex international data sets. For example, the World Bank uses interactive dashboards to visualize global development indicators, enabling policymakers to explore data by country, by region, or by theme. And you can check that out too if you Google the World Bank and go in and check out what they have. Tremendous wealth of information. GIS technology visualizes data spatially, helping to identify geographic patterns and trends. It's particularly effective for mapping market penetration, resource distribution, and regional disparities. For example, UNICEF employs GIS to map vaccination coverage across countries, highlighting regions with low immunization rates and guiding targeted health interventions as needed, as they see needed at least. Obviously, vaccination is a hot topic. We're not going to get into the political aspects of hardly anything in this course, but that's one that we could get into, and we're not. Nevertheless, UNICEF likes to keep track of it. Heat maps represent data density and intensity through color gradients, making it easy to identify areas of high and low activity or interest. They're useful for visualizing regional trends and disparities. For example, in the United States, Google uses heat maps to show COVID-19 infection rates by state, aiding public health officials in resource allocation or response planning. Perhaps a little bit less visibly now in the public domain at least, but obviously COVID is still around, will be around, and perhaps cyclically come back and forth and so forth. But we're not as tuned into perhaps some of those maps that we saw a few years ago. Infographics combine text, images, and data visualization to present information in a concise and engaging format. Usually, they're effective for communicating complex data to broad audiences. The United Nations publishes infographics on sustainable development goals, and that's something I'm very familiar with and have done a lot of work for the United Nations, especially UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, likes having meetings, big time meetings, on the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 169 metrics for those SDGs, but 17 goals, as you probably know. They look at different challenges and progress and accessibility and so forth in a visually appealing manner when you deal with SDGs. And if you Google them, you're going to see all kinds of color coding and interesting data and information perhaps. Tailoring visualizations to fit cultural context ensures that data is easily understood by diverse audiences. This includes using culturally relevant symbols, colors, layouts, and so on. In China, as an example, Baidu's data visualization tools incorporate local cultural elements to present internet usage statistics, making the information more accessible and perhaps relatable to Chinese users. And then finally, here, time series visualization displays data points over time, obviously highlighting trends, cycles, and changes. They're essential most of the time for tracking developments and forecasting future trends as well. In Europe, back to Eurostat, uses time series visualization to depict economic indicators like gross domestic product, GDP growth, and unemployment rates, for example, many other data points as well. But they do help policymakers analyze economic performance over time by doing so. Well, we're back to David Letterman. That makes me archaic as well a little bit, but back to David Letterman and his top 10 lists. Obviously, he's not on TV anymore, so I'm going archaic on myself a little bit, but I like the top 10 flavor of the storyline. So this time we have the top 10 challenges in multi-country data analysis. They're sort of put in a top 10 structure, frankly, with the number 1 being the most important and 10 the least. But like I said once or twice before, it's not that valid where ranking the topics are valid though. Letterman again always starts with number 10 and comes back up to 1 and sort of a big reveal at that particular point in time. But I don't like doing it in a lecture kind of setting, asynchronous lecture at that. So check out the 1 through 10 and we'll go from there. I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these because they become important when we encapsulate everything around data analysis. Nevertheless, the one Data compatibility, ensuring compatibility across different data sets can be challenging, obviously, due to variations in data formats, collection methods, and standards across countries. Harmonizing these data sets is crucial for accurate analysis. For example, OECD again faces data compatibility issues when comparing educational performance across member countries. Sort of the example that I kicked off a little bit earlier. That requires extensive data standardization efforts as best they can. Language differences and translation inaccuracies can lead to misunderstandings, obviously, and data misinterpretation, equal if not more important. Proper translation and localization are essential to maintain data integrity. In multinational surveys like the European Social Survey, translating questionnaires into multiple languages accurately is critical to ensure consistent data collection. If we move on to number 3, cultural variations can affect how questions are understood and answered, leading to biased or incomparable results. Accounting for these differences is vital for meaningful analysis. For example, in global research, global consumer research that is, companies like P&G, Procter & Gamble adapt survey questions to local cultural context to obtain accurate and comparable data across these different markets. Different countries then have varying legal and ethical standards for data collection, storage, and usage. Compliance with these regulations is necessary to avoid legal issues and maintain ethical standards. We've already used the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, aspect of the European Union that imposes strict data privacy regulations that international companies must adhere to when collecting data from EU citizens. And they're among the strictest that we have around the world. Data quality, as we discussed a little bit, can vary significantly across countries. Some countries don't measure obviously all the variables every year. Some do in a very diligent manner. So comparing one country to another country year to year may not be super easy, but there are differences in data collection infrastructure and practices that we need to take into account. Ensuring high quality, reliable data is a major challenge. The World Health Organization, for example, deals with varying data quality in global health statistics, necessitating rigorous validation and adjustment methods to ensure reliable data year on year, as an example. Timely data collection or reporting can be inconsistent across countries, leading to outdated or irrelevant data. Keeping data current is essential for accurate trend analysis, even though it could be costly and perhaps not as easy to accomplish across all of the different countries in the world and territories. But it's important for decision making. In economic research, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, strives to obtain the most recent data from countries possible, which I've sort of been alluding to through a few of these examples, but variations in reporting schedules can cause delay and inconsistencies. And now differences in technological infrastructure and access can impact the ability to collect and analyze data consistently across countries. Addressing those or these disparities is critical for comprehensive data analysis, obviously. Move to another continent now. Take the example of Africa. Varying levels of internet access and technological infrastructure pose challenges for data collection, as seen in the implementation of digital health initiatives on that continent. Socioeconomic disparities can influence data availability and reliability, with lower income countries often facing more significant challenges in data collection and reporting. The World Bank's efforts to collect poverty data in developing countries are often hindered by limited resources and infrastructure, affecting the completeness and accuracy of the data that the World Bank does collect. And then a couple more. Political instability and social unrest can disrupt, of course, data collection efforts, leading to gaps and inconsistencies in data sets. Researchers must account for these differences when analyzing data. In, for example, conflict-affected regions, as a part of the Middle East and a few other different places that are going on. There's always something going on in the world, unfortunately. And I don't want to pinpoint down too many of those regions. Middle East have a long history, unfortunately, of some unrest and conflict, at least affected regions that we do need to take into account. Data collection in those areas for humanitarian aid assessments and other related issues is frequently disrupted, even though it seems like a positive thing to do. That impacts the reliability of the information gathered, obviously. Effective multi-country data analysis, the last one here of the top 10 Letterman list, often requires coordination among various international agencies and organizations. Differences in data collection methodologies and goals can complement this coordination. Coordination between the World Health Organization and local health agents, for example, during Global Health Service, highlights the challenge in aligning methodologies and ensuring consistent data collection across countries. That's a lot of material, especially on the last screen if you were following along my top 10 list. Some brief examples of companies and worldwide organizations, obviously. But let's, like I do sometimes, let's look a bit closer at multinational corporations that are for profit and their effective data interpretation. So let's look at these 5: Coca-Cola's global marketing strategy, Unilever's sustainable living plan, McDonald's localization strategy in Asia, Nike's digital marketing in China, and Tesco's customer loyalty program in the UK. Let's take a look at each of those just as an example for this particular session. So Coca-Cola utilizes advanced data analytics to tailor its marketing strategies to local preferences. By analyzing consumption patterns and cultural trends, Coke successfully launched region-specific campaigns such as the Share a Coke campaign, which personalized bottles with local names in various countries, boosting sales significantly. Unilever's sustainable living plan leverages extensive marketing research data to identify and address sustainability issues across different regions. Through detailed consumer insights and environmental impact data, Unilever developed region-specific sustainability initiatives, improving brand reputation and increasing market share in diverse international markets. And then McDonald's analyzes local consumer preferences and dietary habits, interestingly enough, to adapt its menu offerings, for example, in Asia. By integrating regional flavors and ingredients such as McSpicy paneer in India and the samurai pork burger in Thailand, McDonald's successfully increased its market penetration and customer satisfaction in these countries. Moving on to Nike, which uses big data analytics and social media insights to drive its digital marketing strategy in China as one example. By understanding then local trends and engaging consumers through platforms like WeChat, it's very popular, as probably everyone knows in China, Nike created personalized marketing campaigns that resonated with Chinese consumers, leading to significant growth in online sales. And then finally, Tesco, our grocery store again in the United Kingdom mainly, utilizes customer data from its Club Card loyalty program to gain insights into shopping behaviors and preferences. Through detailed analysis of purchasing patterns, Tesco tailors its promotions and product offerings, as many grocery firms and other firms do as well, but in their case, that enhanced customer loyalty and drove sales growth in the highly competitive UK retail market, as an example. Well, Coca-Cola, Unilever, McDonald's, Nike, and Tesco alike use data on the previous storyline and chart slide and interpret it to their advantage to do better in the marketplace. There are numerous good examples, obviously, of data use and interpretation. This clip that I did is real and data supported. Specifically, some data and experts suggest that we have a chocolate crisis. I know that makes little sense, but check me out here in a few seconds, or perhaps better stated as a cocoa bean crisis. But is that true? Data analysis and interpretation can be a tricky issue, often up for interpretation. I have a hard time thinking that the world would solve the potential chocolate crisis before it happened, that it wouldn't be able to solve it, I should say, before it happened. Nevertheless, let's see what kind of story I created on this particular topic.
Cocoa beans have been in the news for the last few years, but the world may not have noticed. Chocolate is everywhere, right? Let's connect the dots. Today, Africa accounts for 73% of the world's cocoa bean production, but only 19% of the cocoa bean roasting, grinding, refinement, which is done mainly in other parts of the world, led by Europe at 39%. Lots of beans are exported from Africa to Europe and around the globe. In Africa, the Ivory Coast, Ghana, Nigeria, and Cameroon lead the way in exporting the cocoa bean commodity. And therein lies the crux, perhaps, that cocoa beans are viewed as a commodity. The concern is that the world may be using too much cocoa or not producing enough and may run out of this amazing commodity soon. This would ultimately result in much higher prices and limited access to the raw product. In fact, cocoa may not even be viewed as a commodity anymore at that time. Tracing the word cocoa to the Spanish word cacao, cocoa beans have a Latin American heritage. But as we said, today Africa is mainly the focus. Unlike other commodities, 90% of cocoa is grown by small farmers versus big agricultural companies. 73% of these small collections of growers reside in Africa, 11% in Asia, and 16% in the Americas. Let's hope the world solves our potential cocoa bean problem and keeps the delicious chocolate available for years to come.
Reports in general are something we all have done numerous times, right? In some way, you may see those 500-word assignments that I'm asking you to do every other session as a form of reports. Nevertheless, we all have an idea of what we want in reports. International marketing research, though, is unique and perhaps some guidelines for effectively communicating research findings to international stakeholders from different cultural and professional backgrounds would be good. We really could be talking about an endless number of guidelines here, so I'm sighing a little bit and stalling a little bit. But in that spirit, I used a background that seems, frankly, endless in its complexity, but it's also a nice kitchen sink of marketing-related issues. So maybe you take a look at the background a little bit, and then the bottom left, we get some bullet points that I want to talk about. I pared down my best practice for reporting international findings into these 5 core bullets. I think they're generic enough, but also self-explanatory enough, and I'll add some examples as you see as well. Adapt your communication style and content to fit the cultural and professional backgrounds of your audience. Kind of goes without saying, it's easier perhaps said than done though. Use appropriate language, examples, and formats that resonate with their experiences and expectations. For example, in Japan, presentations often emphasize harmony and group consensus, so using collective achievements and respectful language can enhance receptivity of that particular report for that particular audience. Avoid jargon and complex terminology that may not be understood by all stakeholders. Use clear, straightforward language and provide definitions for any necessary technical terms. We oftentimes talk like we know what we're talking about, but definitions, maybe a table of definitions, certainly footnote of definitions on a page and so on, would be valuable and communicate more clearly. When presenting to a global team at a multinational company like Siemens, using simple English and avoiding idiomatic expressions ensures clarity and understanding across diverse language proficiencies, perhaps. Next, utilize visual aids such as charts, graphs, and infographics to convey data effectively. Incorporate examples and case studies relevant to the local context to make the findings more relatable and impactful. And don't lose track of case studies. We sort of over bombard students in universities with case studies, but case studies are practical presentations of related examples that work really well in these type of reports as well. In Brazil, using visual data representations and local market examples, for example, help stakeholders better grasp market research findings, as seen, for example, in Nestle's localized marketing reports that they do. Encourage engagement and feedback through interactive elements such as obviously Q&A sessions, question and answer sessions, workshops perhaps, or collaborative discussions when you present the report or get to even a drafted report. This fosters a two-way communication flow and ensures that stakeholders' perspectives are considered. During global project meetings at IBM, as another example, incorporating interactive pools and breakout discussions helps IBM engage diverse teams and gather valuable input from various cultural viewpoints. They're everywhere. And remember, IBM is also the company that Gert Hofstede used to collect a lot of data on culture that he then became he became legendary for his culture work, and IBM was a foundation for that work. Be mindful of cultural norms and practice when communicating research findings. Show respect for cultural differences in communication styles, body language, and meeting etiquette to build, frankly, trust and rapport. In the Middle East, as an example, understanding the importance of hospitality and personal relationships can enhance communication effectiveness. Formal introductions and expressions of respect are crucial when presenting research findings in that particular part of the world and in many other parts of the world too. Reporting is, of course, about interpreting the data also. Let's see if you buy my interpretation of what I call the trifecta of today's economic climate. The economic climate changes a little bit, and you tape these little clips that I have embedded into your sessions. I tape them at certain points in time, and we can call that a cross-sectional point in time, since we are talking about marketing research more generally. I think this example still holds true, will still hold true for a little while, but it's a trifecta of relatively high customer satisfaction as we have right now, relatively low unemployment as we have right now, and relatively low inflation as we have right now. Could it be higher or lower in both areas? Could it be better or worse in both? Of course it could be. We're talking about relatively high customer satisfaction, relatively low unemployment, and relatively low inflation. What does that mean, that trifecta for customer satisfaction? So let's check myself out on the clip that I created on this particular topic that I talk about customer satisfaction.
According to the American Customer Satisfaction Index, ACSI, which has tracked company, industry, and national customer satisfaction since 1994, consumers are only a fraction of a point less satisfied today on a 100-point scale than they have ever been with their products and services. The Global Customer Satisfaction Index shows similar results across the world's countries. Not surprisingly, at the same time, the strong economy has produced an all-important drop in the unemployment rate. These low unemployment rates result in more spending, generally satisfied customers, but also a much tighter labor market. This tighter labor market has resulted in more people seeking new, better positions than ever before. This is where things get tricky. When the unemployment rate dips and many workers switch jobs, the effect can be a negative to customer service, customer satisfaction, and to economic growth. Many low-paying and perhaps less prestigious jobs are customer-facing, such as retail, restaurants, and call centers, and many workers will transition out of these jobs. They will be replaced by employees with less experience and less training to offer strong service to customers. Low unemployment rates and job switching result in eroding customer service for many companies across many industries globally. If customer service erodes enough, the consequence is also a dip in customer satisfaction. This often causes consumers to hold on to their wallets more tightly, slowing down the pace of global economic growth.
As with all sessions, I conclude with an article. And as always, my general reminder that for sessions 1, 3, 5, and 7, we had assignments to go along with the session, and article for sessions 2, 4, 6, and now 8. We only have an article as a complement to the asynchronous session, plus of course being covered on the next quiz. So since we are in session 8, there's no assignment for this particular article, and that may be advantageous since it's another academic article, but some coverage of the article will be on the next exam. This is again another academic research article. Typically we have Harvard Business Review, California Management Review, as you've noticed, but 3 out of the, or a few of these articles, 3 out of 10 I believe, are academic in orientation. This one is academic. It's not an analytical or typical academic article, but instead focuses on the marketing ecosystem and the orchestration of that ecosystem. And you've heard me mention ecosystem as a word and as a phrase and as a phenomenon, frankly, in a few different sessions now, but everything we talk about in this course on international marketing research really does take place in an international ecosystem with cogwheel effects, as I have the cover of my Global Supply Chain Management book that you can check out for free and download the PDF of. I have cogwheels that connect the world and the countries together, and there are connections there. So there are nodes, there are activity links, there are resource ties. All of those in a cogwheel effect are interesting. Nothing obviously in the world happens in a vacuum. We would like to think that we could do certain things around the world and it would affect nothing else, but that's just simply not true. Hope you enjoyed the article. Both the marketing ecosystem and the orchestration of it are defined in the abstract to set the tone for the paper, so that makes it super easy. And I have a little bit of the brief of what else is in the paper that you may want to check out also. And we're really out. I'll start outro music right away. See you next time. That was session 8. We'll have a couple of more to go. A couple more of everything to go, frankly, in the class. Thanks for being part of it.